Van Johnson finally breaks silence on Carol Landis. Van Johnson was born Charles Van Johnson on August 25, 1916 in Newport, Rhode Island. He was one of the brightest stars of Hollywood's golden days, known for his all-American charm, boyish good looks, and natural charisma. Johnson became one of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer's most loved leading men during the 1940s and 1950 seconds. His freckled face, red hair, and warm smile made him stand out in a time when dark, tough gyros ruled the screen, but behind the wholesome image and friendly on-screen personality was a man of quiet strength, dealing with personal struggles, career wins, and the complicated pressures of fame with grace and humility. Johnson's early life was far from glamorous. His childhood was marked by instability. His mother left when he was a young boy, and his father, a plumber, struggled with alcoholism. The loneliness of those early years made Johnson want to find escaping belonging, something he discovered in the theater. As a teenager, he loved performing, taking part in school plays, and eventually listing his sights on Broadway. His dreams led him to New York City, where he took on small parts in stage shows and chorus lines, slowly learning the craft of acting through pure hard work. His first big break came in the 1930s when he joined the cast of several Broadway shows, including New Faces of 1936 and To Many Girls, where his natural stage presence began to get attention from talent scouts and producers. By the early 1940s, Hollywood took notice of the fresh-faced young man with a charming smile. Johnson signed with Warner Brothers, but it was his move to M that truly launched his career. The studio, known for its polished image-making and star-building system, so Johnson's wholesome appeal and carefully created his image as the perfect boy next door. MGM paired him with some of the biggest names in Hollywood, including June Allyson, Esther Williams, Judy Garland, and Lana Turner, making him one of their most money-making stars. His breakthrough came with A Guy Named Joe, 1943, where he starred opposite Spencer Tracy and Irene Dunne. Ironically, during the filming, Johnson suffered a nearly deadly car accident that left him with a metal plate in his head. Rather than stopping his career, MGM used the tragedy to boost his image as a brave all-American hero who had literally survived hardship. Throughout the 1940s, Johnson became known for the upbeat, positive esprit of wartime America. He starred in hit after hit, including Two Girls and a Sailor, 194,430 Seconds Over Tokyo, 1944, and The Caine Mutiny, 1954. His characters were often men of decency and honesty, soldiers, sailors, and ordinary guys caught in crisis situations. Audiences found comfort in his roles. He represented the hope and goodness that people wanted during and after World War II. Johnson's pairing with June Allyson was specially adored. Their chemistry was warm, believable, and wholesome, making them one of that time's most popular on-screen couples. Despite his fame, Johnson remained humble and friendly, often described by co-workers as a gentleman both on and off the set. However, the public image of constant optimism sometimes hid the more complicated realities of his personality. He struggled with loneliness and the pressure of keeping up Mem's carefully created reputation. As the studio era faded, Johnson adapted with dignity. He took on character roles in films like The Last Time I Saw Paris 1954 and Divorce American Style 1967 and found renewed success on television in series such as Murder, She Wrote and The Love Boat. Later in life, he became a beloved fixture of the stage once again. Touring with theater productions like Damn the Yankees and La Cage aux Folles, audiences, both old and new, continued to be charmed by his genuine warmth and timeless screen presence. Van Johnson's marriage to Evie Linnebot Wynn in 1947 was one of the most talked about marriages in Hollywood's golden era, not only because of the glamour surrounding it, but also due to the complicated web of relationships behind it. Evie Lynn was the ex-wife of Johnson's close friend and fellow actor Keenan Wynn, and the circumstances of her marriage made it an ongoing topic of curiosity and guessing among fans and insiders alike. The wedding, which took place on January 25, 1947, was arranged in a hurry, and some Hollywood claimants at the time whispered that either had been set up by the Power Film Studio as a public relations move. MGM, which was heavily invested in Johnson's career, was known for shaping the personal lives of its stars to fit moral standards and image expected by the public. The studio had built Johnson up as a wholesome, all-American Madden idol, and it was considered important for him to show a traditional, family-oriented image to his millions of admirers. Evie Lynn Abbott, who was born in 1914, was an actress and dancer before she became Mrs. Keenan Wynn. She was intelligent, witty, and had a reputation for being outspoken, qualities that made her stand out in Hollywood's social circles. When she married Van Johnson, she brought with her not only 2 young children from her previous marriage, but also an established connection to him through her ex-husband's family. Many guessed that MGM executives, especially the studio head Louis B. Mayer, encouraged the match to stop long-running rumors about Johnson's private life. In the post-war years, when gossip and hints could make or break a star, Mayer was determined to make sure that one of his most money-making actors would keep a clean masculine image appealing to the female audience. The marriage between Van Johnson and Evie Lynn was, at least publicly, filled with usual trappings of Hollywood romance. Glamorous parties, photographs of the smiling couple in fan magazines, and appearances together at premieres and charity events. They welcomed a daughter, Schuler, in 1948, and for a time the family appeared to represent domestic perfection. Yet beneath the surface, their relationship was far more complicated than it appeared. Evie Lynn later claimed that her marriage to Johnson had been arranged under pressure and that it lacked emotional closeness from the start. In interviews years later, she openly discussed how she felt the marriage was a fake designed to help the studio's image more than to create personal happiness. Through the 1950 seconds and early 1960s, Van Johnson's film career flourished with roles in hits such as Battleground 1949, The Caine Mutiny 1954, and Brigadoon 1954. Despite his busy schedule and polished public persona, those close to the couple reported that their marriage had become increasingly strained. Evie Lynn, who had given up much of her own career to support Johnson, often felt averted out by his fame and isolated from his professional world. Hollywood gossip columns hinted at tensions between them, but Johnson kept his private life guarded, rarely speaking about his marriage or family in interviews. After more than 2 decades together, Evie Lynn Abbott and Van Johnson divorced in 1968, officially ending one of Hollywood's most mysterious marriages. Their daughter Skylar was already grown, and Evie Lynn later spoke openly about her reasons for leaving. She claimed that their union had been deeply unhappy and that she could no longer live in a relationship built on pretending. The divorce was friendly in legal terms, but emotionally it marked the end of a long and painful chapter for both parties. Johnson, a birth professional, remained silent about details, continuing to work steadily in stage, television, and film. In latter years, Evie Lynn became known for her frankness in interviews, particularly one in which she described how MGM had basically arranged her marriage to Johnson. "They needed Van to be married," she said bluntly, "and they picked me." Her remarks brought back long-standing debates among Hollywood historians about how the studio system controlled the personal lives of its stars. Meanwhile, Van Johnson never remarried. He lived quietly after his divorce, dedicating himself to acting and keeping close friendships with many of his former co-stars. For decades, Hollywood insiders whispered about the connection between the golden boy of MGM, Van Johnson, and destiny yet tragic actress Carol Landis. Both were major figures during the golden age of cinema. He, the likable boy next door, heartthrob, adored by millions. She, the dazzling blonde bombshell who captivated audience with her warmth and energy. Yet behind the cameras, there existed a more intimate, complex connection that Johnson rarely discussed publicly. Now, in his later reflections, Van Johnson finally broke his silence about Carol Landis, offering an honest, emotional portrait of a woman he described as one of the most genuine souls Hollywood ever swallowed whole. "I met Carol when she was already a star," Johnson began, recalling their first meeting at a Hollywood social gathering in the early 1940s. "She walked into the room like she owned every inch of it, but not out of arrogance. She had this light about her, this energy that made people turn their heads before they even realized it." Johnson described how Landis, despite her glamour, was friendly and kind, making newcomers to the film scene feel welcome. There was nothing fake about her. She could make a room full of stars feel like just people having a laugh. "That's what I loved about her," according to Johnson. Their friendship grew during wartime Hollywood, a period when studios made tons of patriotic films and stars were expected to maintain perfect images. Carol was the real deal. He said shed and hide behind a mask. She went overseas to entertain troops when Manuthers stayed behind. She didn't just sing a song and leave. She stayed. She listened to them. She hugged them. That was who she was. She gave too much of herself. Johnson admired Landis' dedication to the effort. Recalling that she often came back from tours emotionally and physically drained, she had seen things over there that broke her heart, but she never let on how tired she was. She'd smile, go to a party, and light up the room like nothing was wrong. When asked if their friendship ever turned romantic, Johnson paused. Carol was complicated, admitted softly. There was a sadness in her, even when she laughed. We cared about each other deeply, but Hollywood wasn't kind to people like us when we showed too much emotion. His words hinted at a deeper affection. One perhaps unspoken or forbidden due to pressures of studio control and public perception. You couldn't just be yourself back then. The studios told you who to love, what to say, how to smile. Carol hated that game, and maybe that's part of what broke her. Johnson also talked about the of Landis' early death in 1948, which shocked Hollywood and left many friends, including him, devastated when I heard the news. I couldn't believe it, he said, his voice filled with lingering sorrow. Carol wasn't supposed to go like that. She was too full of life. But looking back, I think she felt trapped. The business, the heartbreaks, it all caught up to her. Spoke about the pressure she faced, the disappointment after being overlooked to be the studios she helped build up, and the personal trouble she went through in her relationships. People said she was too emotional, too dramatic. But that's only because she loved with everything she had. In Hollywood, that kind of heart gets punished. Reflecting on her legacy, Johnson grew quiet for a moment before saying, Carol deserved better from the industry, from the people around her, maybe even from me. She was ahead of her time. If she'd lived today with her honesty and her spirit, people would have celebrated her. Back then, they called her too much. But to me, she was just right. His voice softened as hair called her laughter. You never forget a laugh like Carol's. It came from deep inside, like she was laughing for Verioni who didn't know how. In his later years, Van Johnson remained one of few from that golden era who continued to speak of Carol Landis with both admiration and regret. We all lost something when she left, he confessed. She had this fire, and when it went out, Hollywood got a little dimmer. In Themed, Johnson's reflections were not just about nostalgia. They were an acto remembering, a tribute to a woman whose brilliance was too often overshadowed by tragedy. Carol was more than a pretty face, he concluded. She was heart, courage, and truth in a town built on illusion. And I'll always be grateful that I knew her. Through these words, Van Johnson finally allowed the world to see what he had carried in silence for years. A portrait of Carol Landis, not as a Hollywood casualty, but as a bright spirit whose warmth, wit, and humanity touched even those like him who stood in the blinding glare of stardom. As the years passed, the actor's health began to decline, prompting a move to Tappan Zee Manor, a peaceful assisted living residence nestled in the quiet riverside town of Nyack, New York. There, surrounded by bickering staff and the gentle beauty of Hudson Valley, Johnson spent his final years in peace. Despite his age, he remained warm and engaging, often sharing stories from his career with those who cared for him. Tales of working with legends like June Allison, Spencer Tracy, and Katharine Hepburn, or off the whirlwind fame that had encephaloed him wherever he went. Even as time dimmed his once boyish features, his eyes still sparkled with same youthful enthusiasm that had made him a matinee idol in the 1940s. On December 12, 2008, Van Johnson passed away peacefully at the age of 92, leaving behind a legacy that few could match. His death marked the end of an era, the passing of one of the last great stars from Hollywood's golden age. Though the applause had long faded and the cameras had stopped rolling, Johnson's spirit lived on in the hundreds of roles he had brought to life, his image forever preserved on film for generations to come. In keeping with his wishes, his remains were cremated, a simple and understated farewell for a man who had once stood at the center of America's movie dreams. To his fans, his charm, optimism, and effortless grace will never fade. Van Johnson would forever remain the bright, likable boy next door who lit up the screen and the hearts of millions.